I see.
I didn't know that.
And he was,
Never heard that.
and this Mrs., or this, what's your senator's name used to be?
Senator
Keating.
Keating,
Mhm.
his mother was a Barnard
Yes, that's right.
of that family.
That was Timothy Barnard, I believe.
Yep.
They lived down at what was known as Barnard's Corners. It's down in the southeastern end of the town of Mendon.
Yeah.
Up where?
In the southeastern section
Yeah.
of the town of Mendon. It was known
Well,
as Barnard's Corners.
I found out one time, when I went back later, I found an old monument over there on south of, between Canandaigua and Victor. And it said on it Simeon Park. And I went back next week or so and asked the people, and the thruway was just then coming through, right to the back end, and they closed off the roads and so forth, and I had an awful time, but I finally found people. They told me to go up the street, up the road towards Canandaigua, where I would find a Dr. Park, a woman. I had quite a time. She didn't want to talk to me until I happened to tell her I'd been to Chicago and asked about it, and I told her that an old friend of mine, Dr. Franklin Martin. Oh, did you know Dr. Franklin H. Martin? This old lady, and I said, yes, I knew him. We had Sunday supper many times. Well, he was the originator and founder of the College of Physicians and Surgeons. You will see their
Oh, yes.
marking some of the, still in some of the doctor's office. And you know, I went back a year or two later, tried to find that place, and I couldn't find it to save my life because they were building this racetrack and they changed the roads around, so I never found it. She was going to give me a lot of information. But that group of old, the Treats and the Wilcox, there's another one too. Well, the Park.
The Always
I don't know.
were an early family that settled out at Tomlinson's Corners.
Probably. I've got it in my genealogy at home, but I can't remember who they are. But the only,
Where did they come? They all came from around
Windham.
Windham, Connecticut.
and then up into Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Then they came,
Came out here.
and it tells in my Barrett genealogy how they traveled.
Oh.
My ancestors traveled and stopped. They stopped at Sanger Field.
That's interesting.
And,
It'd be
uh,
interesting to know the route they took.
Yes.
But they came right straight from up
Is that-
eastern Massachusetts.
Is that Barrett genealogy a published genealogy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it. My Aunt Julia Barrett, my father's aunt, had this copy, and I had it rebound. It was
Well,
in bad shape then.
It's probably in some library,
But-
not everyone, but
I'm in that genealogy, and it shows I'm the last one.
yes.
I think they carry a genealogy to the second generation, don't they?
Some do. I mean, they're all different. It's,
But my park and
you know the date of that one?
the only thing that I would pin that down is, let me see. I don't think that's as old because there's telephone equipment on there,
Oh.
on the post. That see, there's an automobile there in front too.
Well. Now this is a woolen mill.
Who wrote Masonic Temple on there?
I believe probably my mother did.
Well, what's the
Maybe.
Masonic Temple now? But,
Well, yes.
That was the Wilcox.
oh, I would say that is in the early 1900s, probably the first 10 years somewhere.
We have a series of pictures.
Yeah, this is the woolen mill.
Yes, this is, it shows, this picture is an old picture, and it shows the old stone arch bridge and the dam just above Dutch Hollow. And this is another picture. of the creek, Honeoye Creek, and the so-called Hunt's Dam, which dammed up the creek water for the mill. Would you like to tell us what you might remember about that?
I think that's what we call the lower falls. Looks to me as if it was right back at the schoolhouse, our old schoolhouse.
Oh, no, Mr.
Isn't it?
No, the Lower Falls is the back of the Presbyterian church, or nearer that, back on Hyde Park. And this is below.
Well, I think this is the same pictures, practically.
Yes.
There, I didn't notice, there's the bridge in there, and in here is the bridge way in back of it. So this is
That's
just
back at the
below,
Dutch
this
Hollow.
is just below what's the Dutch Hollow place.
Yes.
And both of them are, in fact. And this, up on top of the, I know what that is, a family named Richardson lived up there. Eva Richardson was a school teacher, and Ed Richardson worked there in the stores and so forth.
Ida Richardson, Bertha
Probably.
Richardson, school teachers.
Let me see, and then there was also a Richardson whose father was a minister. They lived up on York Street. He was a retired Methodist minister. You see, most of that is not of what you'd call historical or genealogical history information, is it?
Bill Gardner and
George Valance
Valance
married.
married. I mean, it gives their marriage date, which
That's interesting.
would be hard to,
Mr.
okay.
Valance became a very well-known.
And you'll probably find in there his death too, in both of their deaths.
you know.
The
somewhere.
present Catholic manse is the farmer Valance home on Monroe Street.
Well, there's
They built it. George built that.
really
Okay.
quite a...
George Valance. That was a vacant. No,
Interesting.
there was an old man Allen lived in there. Albie Allen, I think, lived in that house. And I think why I remember so many of these things, my Aunt Julia Barrett was alive. And as a little boy, she used to give me a penny, to carry food back and forth. So there was another family lived up there beyond where the telephone company office is now, over on the other side of the street, on that corner of what was High Street. And I can't think what their names was, but I had to go up there about every Saturday with a little package of food, and they'd send another one back to me. And Aunt Julia Barrett died about 1895, so I couldn't have been very old when I used to travel up and down there.
What is that store that's in that frame right there? I take it
Well,
that is a store.
That's the
Is that one
what
you
we call-
recognize?
what I would call the old Downey store, but later it became Ed Brooks's. There's a picture in there somewhere shows E.G. Brooks over the top of it.
That picture now.
Isn't that what it is?
No, it's now the cargo department
Yeah,
store.
probably.
Mhm.
But it was originally the Downey.
That's interesting.
And that's a most interesting picture.
Yes, indeed.
It came from the estate of the late Mrs. Jeanette Brooks.
I presume that if I put a large magnifying glass on here, that I could name some of those.
Oh, really? Want to try?
Well, I mean, I would have to think.
Huh.
And I can't hold my hand still enough for
Uh-huh.
these.
Could you hold it, Tim?
There's another picture. Have you got that? It says Chambers Store.
Yes.
That's
we
not
have-
Chambers Store at
No,
all.
we have a picture, a large picture. We have a small copy. We have a picture, a big picture. The Historical Society has a. Fine.
Well, while she's looking for that, does this look familiar?
The train does.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's way back when. I mean, I think that's back the days when they had wood burners.
Wood burners? Mm-hmm, looks
Because
that,
the railroad, the ran here on this, what we call
Peanut
peanut
line?
branch,
Mhm.
didn't look like this.
oh,
I rode on them so much.
Mhm.
And
She's got a
but
big-
I've got, that's probably about right. I can't make them whether it's 1881 or 1887.
This is a small copy of a large picture. Shuart,
Yeah.
of the early stores.
Is that 1887?
Is this the one that's the man with the derby, or the stovepipe hat
No.
in front of it?
That's right.
Yeah, this is it. Well, that store, I can't, my memory's so poor.
Well,
It was owned originally by a name she might remember, began with C. But then my grandfather Park,
that's not the Chamberlain.
huh?
Not the Chamberlain.
No,
Mhm.
the Chambers, they named
Chambers,
it.
I see.
Somewhere, I think it was in that book they got out when the
Oh, yes.
sesquicentennial was here.
Mhm.
But my grandfather Park and Timothy Holden came over and started a store there, and Timothy Holden also did banking. And then his son, Alec Holden, I think that Timothy built the bank building
Oh.
next
mhm.
to this store, and my grandfather and his son, Herbert Park, ran the store then. They took off this balcony, or I mean this overhead,
Mhm.
and this Downey store that we saw there
This one, yes. Mhm.
is, I think it was this same one down there.
I see. Uh-huh.
But they've got mixed up because you see there was a Chambers store up at North Bloomfield.
I see.
Several generations of Chambers
Uh-huh.
ran a store up there.
Uh-huh.
And they get mixed up on, but this, the man, maybe it was Culver. I must find out. I think a man named Culver had this store
Uh-huh.
originally.
Uh-huh. Then the bank that they started, your Uncle Herbert, would it be?
He never started with it.
Oh.
The Holden.
Oh, it was the Holden that started.
They started the
That
bank.
would be the first bank in
That was-
Honeoye.
yeah.
That's right.
Mhm.
And I think
Timothy
Timothy Holden.
Timothy Holden. Mhm.
Started the bank, and I was telling her, Timothy Holden and my grandfather, Edwin Park, came over from Mendon and started that store. And they listed as Chamber store, it wasn't, it was, and a man named Babcock was in it one time. with
Well,
it.
that's interesting. I never knew. Did you say Timothy Holden? And what was the other name?
My grandfather Park came over.
Started the store.
And I don't know where they came at the same time, but, and then there was my grandfather's, or my grandmother rather, grandfather's wife, Georgiana, Carpenter her name was, and they may have been mixed up somewhere on that, because her sister's husband, Worden Babcock, was associated in the store for a while. Incidentally, if you ever hear of any Carpenter genealogy, I'd be interested in finding out. One time a few years ago, and the man who owns it now, it was a German name, is still, and I see their names in the paper occasionally. He told me he'd look up his deeds and so forth. I can't tell what house it is or
Yeah.
where it is, but I'm trying to.
Trying to
See, I've
locate
got
those.
my, the Short family pretty well set up, and my Park family,
Mhm.
and the Barrett family, but I haven't anything in my grandmother Carpenter's.
Hmm.
And I
Well,
stopped off in Iona the other day.
Wasn't there a Lucius Carpenter? I think I
Different-
recall my
entirely
mother.
different family.
Oh, that's your family.
well, that's the
There's
trouble.
Lute Carpenter and
Lute
George Carpenter, and their mother was an Allen. They used to have these wagons in the lumber yards that they could carry lumber on. There was no box on it, but they went up to Pierce Brothers store, or where Despardy was bought out, and took that wagon that he brought it down to the schoolhouse and tied the lanyard to the flag and pulled up on the flagpole. I can remember that.
Would that be a Halloween
Yeah.
trick? Uh-huh.
And there was an old man named, lived next door to the schoolyard. And you can imagine the building that was in the back of his lot, they used to tip
Oh,
over
awful.
into the creek every Halloween.
Yeah.
And
How about other kinds of recreation? Just boys and girls getting together?
Not very much.
Not very much. Mm.
The baseball, an awful lot of baseball, and up on West Main Street, we used to play a lot of, well, just kicking football, girls and boys.
Any dancing?
Oh, it had to be pretty well organized. We had dancing clubs, and the older people, I used to go sometimes with parents.
It would be more older people than...
They had had a dancing teacher came here and taught them the different dances without being called.
Yes.
They knew them. That was, and I used to go to dances a lot when I was back and forth with Mrs. Guy Macumber. He was crippled, you know. Remember, he was lame and couldn't. So we boys used to go and to dance with Mrs. Macumber. Guy, of course, was there with it. But then we used to have dances, the young people, children, you might say, over what we called Otis Hall.
Where was that?
Now that building right at the corner of East Street and Ontario Streets.
Yes, it's still there, isn't it?
Isn't it? Dr. Otis put a shoe store in there at one time, and a man named Moore ran it, Bill Moore's father, and overhead was this hall. And they used a lot, I guess, sort of a lodge hall and so forth. But we used to rent that, and the big time send to Rochester for a big freezer of ice cream that come all packed in ice and have those dances. And then we used to have later also over, there was a dance hall up over Duffy's blacksmith shop.
I never knew that before.
You know where Duffy's blacksmith shop is?
Yes, surely.
But they had a hall up there, and when I think I was still in high school then. But we used to get chaperones, and the chaperones were Edith Cornell, Nett Lang, Ollie Gardner, and we older boys had more fun dancing with the chaperones than we did with the other boys, other
girls.
It was only 4 or 5 years difference. I was surprised when I heard about Mrs. Dwight Allen's death, to find out that she was only 5 years older than I was when she was teaching.
Oh.
And that explains some things that we did too.
It's almost over, so you probably can tell them.
They were in school, they lived in, how many fish you used to live? You had to go upstairs. And she died of grave up here, and there's one around, got a few shorts, but there are none around her yet.
It's S-H-U-A-R-T?
Yes, right.
Is that a Dutch name?
We don't know.
Johannes, you said.
Yeah, Johannes must have been, but we know that they left what they call the lowlands to get away from the Spanish secession. They didn't want to be Catholics. So where they went to, and the Bible were burned. He left here after his wife died and went down there to visit his daughter by his first wife.
How long ago would that be?
Oh heavens, that was in, I should say probably about 18 or 19.
That was too early for anybody else to have recorded the data from the Bible, too.
Well, they had no idea, of course, that he would.
No. But they came from eastern New York?
Yeah, my grandfather was born in a town called Plattekill. That's down in Ulster County.
In Ulster County.
Not far from Kingston, I believe.
That's so much the pattern. The people came from the Hudson River Valley, out here in western New York.
And I don't know much about interim, how they got here. But my other ancestors, my father's mother, the Barretts, they originally settled up down the Concord. And one of their ancestors direct ancestor was the Captain Barrett at the bridge.
Oh,
And
Concord, Massachusetts then. Mhm.
and then later, Stephen Barrett married the daughter of a Stephen Barrett, who were no relation.
Oh, for heaven's
They
sake.
got them both. One came from somewhere in England.
That must have been horribly confusing to you if you were doing the
And there's Stephen
genealogy.
Barrett's
Oh, yes.
in that family. And the funny ones in the Park family, there's so many of them down in those church records down in Connecticut.
Oh, yes.
And I looked around, so many Amariah Park,
Park.
P-A-R-K.
Now that's on the Barrett line?
No, that's the other side.
Oh,
That's my mother's.
that's another side. Uh-huh.
And come to find out, it was Amaziah. Now, you know, they made those
Oh, yes.
S's that look like a Z,
Mm-hmm. That's hard.
and, I mean Z,
Yes.
Amaziah.
Amaziah.
And they thought it was R, Amariah.
Amariah, yeah.
And I found that one of my ancestors, and I got it from the records down there, was killed at the Battle of Stony Point.
Oh, yeah.
That was in the Revolution, or not the war, before the Revolutionary.
Oh, or the French and Indian War.
Yeah. And I gave up. I thought that's too bad. And later I found that he had 2 sons before he was in.
So he carried on right.
But this young man, I say young man, he's not so young now, but his father was born up in what's now West Bloomfield, or I mean North Bloomfield.
Mm-hmm.
And he made a good study of it. He went to England all over, and he has what do they call these photostatic
Copies.
everything.
Mm-hmm. You know, genealogy is becoming much more a status hobby now. It used to be that just little old ladies in tennis shoes were genealogists, and now people are having the time to discover it and linking it up into history. And
People are so apt to think, what difference does it make who you're in?
That's right.
That isn't my idea. My idea is fun.
that's right.
It's
Well, it's like a crossword puzzle. You just
Absolutely.
get you until you can finally get that link. I'm a genealogist myself, so I appreciate your interest. And we have many letters now in our office in the county building. People from the West, for the most part.
I'd like to know whatever became of the pictures that were in the old courthouse
Well,
of the surrogates.
we've got some pictures. I don't think we've got any of the surrogates.
My grandfather, Denton Shuart, was the first elected surrogate of Monroe County.
What was the date that he was elected?
Oh, I think in the 50s or 60s.
50s or 60s. What had been his legal training?
Search me. He went to Genesee Western Seminary, I know that, and I think he went to New York, as you say, to study law. I'm not
Yes,
sure.
they would in a lawyer's office usually.
That's what my father did.
Mm-hmm.
And
Do you know with whom he studied?
who?
Your Denton?
No, I don't.
Uh-huh.
So much of that was accumulated by my father and Irving Shuart.
Mhm.
You may have some of his things that he wrote. He used to pest the newspaper to death by writing.
Oh? They thought it was pestering him.
Recorded.
Probably was, that's all right.
But
The man that your father worked with, who would that be?
all I can think is their names were, I know, I can't remember. I've got it.
Somebody in Rochester?
No, it was in New York.
Or in New York? Well, was he a Honeoye Falls resident at the time?
My father?
Mhm.
Yes, well, yes.
And then where did he study?
Well, he went Lima School,
Lima?
and I don't think he studied anywhere else. I think he went right down there.
And Red Lawn.
Down there 2 or 3 years.
Uh-huh.
And then my grandfather, Denton,
Mm-hmm.
had a stroke, paralysis, or what they call it.
I see.
Affected his speech.
Mhm.
That's all it affected. And father came home to go to the practice.
I see.
And that, I think, was probably about 1880, because
Then your grandfather Denton must have been in the second Monroe courthouse, which was built in 1850 and wasn't raised until about 1890.
I presume so, because he,
I suppose you got any pictures of that?
no, I don't know of any pictures. I know that my mother gave a lot of pictures and things to some historical society in Rochester.
In Rochester.
But it seemed to me that it was the DAR woman, or what do they call them, I think, had some sort of a thing, and they had sales, and she gave them some old furniture. And
Oh, I
things
see,
like that.
I see.
And I'm afraid they got
This
it.
was a money-raising proposition, perhaps, to buy their new DAR house.
That would be about 18
Street.
or 1927 or 8, probably around there sometime. I don't know just when, but
Then your grandfather, Denton, was a county-wide election, wasn't it?
yes, he,
And he must have been well-known,
oh,
all
yeah, he
over.
was well known. I know that the John Lynn, we've got records of the Lynn brothers probably in Rochester. John Lynn was a schoolmate of both my father and my mother. He was born in Mendon, and my mother was too. And then they went to Lima Seminary.
I don't think I know who John Lynn is.
Well, you probably wouldn't, but the Lynn brothers were lawyers there in Rochester.
I see.
And later John Lynn was, what do you call it? Sort of a marshal something. But he was a government appointed lawyer for something. It was like these district attorneys.
Well, he might have been, yes.
Well, he was a government, and he got interested in me getting my commission.
Government, you mean federal government?
Yeah, federal
Yes.
government. And there were two families, lawyers there in Rochester. Now, I guess one of them is still practicing there, the Chamberlains. They, well, both of them came from Mendon, the village of Mendon.
I see.
originally.
How do you suppose they got in from Mendon to Rochester to their practice?
Well,
I mean, commuting wasn't as easy
my
50 years ago.
grandfather used to go in by stage. There was a man named George, I'll get it in a minute, run the stage from here to Rochester.
What road would that go on?
Well, I don't know.
The,
Whether they went down through Rush or through Henrietta, I don't know. But he went almost every day, and he had a team of horses, a big, like the carry-all, and he carried in such things, eggs and butter and things like that, and customers too.
then your grandfather would take that
I think
stage in
so.
every day and then
And
come
then
back
later, I
home.
can remember when he used to go down on this railroad to Rush Junction, and then go down on the Erie, because I remember he's coming down to see, I was visiting our family was visiting my uncle down there in Rochester, who was practicing law. That was my father's brother. And he came in there while eating breakfast. He'd come down on Central to Rush.
Yeah, I suppose it is.
And the way my grandfather happened to get the stroke, he came up on the Erie to Rush Junction, as they used to call it, Gola, which is Gola, I believe now. And it was late, stormy night, before Thanksgiving or something, and there was this train had come on. So there was and this is maybe family history, I mean, but they hired a man down there with a sleigh to bring these 3 or 4 passengers up, and one of them was a small child, and my grandfather they all wore scarves around the child, and the next morning he had a stroke, and they all claimed that it was because he caught cold from not having muffler. But that was the way they went then. This man's name I tried to, who for years ran this stage, was George Howard, and they lived right over there on Church Street, next to where the New York Central used to go through there.
Would this have been the end of the line, just went from Honeoye?
He was just personal. It's just, I don't know how to handle people. I got down here, or the people south of here. but
I had to start.
they're no worse off than we are up in Michigan now because they've discontinued all the railroads
Yes.
north of
Where's your home in Michigan?
Grand Rapids.
That's where my husband comes from.
Is that so?
Mhm.
What was his name?
Thompson. Lived in LA for a long time. Father Thompson was in the automatic piano business, which failed. And he was retired when I met my husband, so that
There's
we've
a-
been away from there now for quite a while.
Still going, a piano factory over in
Alien, no.
Grand Haven, Michigan. Still
Jukebox type of thing. it is.
Still a piano, a story or something like
I don't
that.
remember what the name of it is even.
Well, Mrs. Shuart, I'd like to inquire, do you recall anything about the trolley that brought the Lima people down to get the train?
Very much. I remember all the talk about when they built it, and all the time they had up there to the corner, Dan's Corners. They came down through the fields, and then there they cut around through and ran down along the road for a little ways, and then cut about through where the Lehigh Valley was, and came in to the New York Central Depot over on the side tracks. Well, back to what used to be the old freight house. Do you remember the freight house where it was?
Yes.
And had their station over there. And I rode the trolley back and forth to Lima School much of the time. That one year I was up there when the weather was good. And the powerhouse was right over in back of, did you ever see Corby's collision place up there? Right over in back of that, only on the other side of the road.
That's where the powerhouse.
That's where the powerhouse was.
I didn't know that.
It was financed largely by the citizens of Lima. But later, time when I was alive, or I mean, time I was born, it was built. I can remember when it was built. But later when I was going to school, it was very convenient because before that they had to run buses and everything to get the people who came there to school from here up to Lima. And then, of course, later, the Lehigh Valley ran up through there, too.
Would be within your memory when the first automobile came to Honeoye,
Easy,
probably.
I rode in it.
Who owned it?
Well, Frank Jobs, Vin Duran's father, had the first one in this town.
I expect it was quite a sight.
Yes, it was, but the first one that came here that I remember was a relative of ours. His mother was my grandmother's sister. Their names were Babcock, and they lived over in Medina. And Fred Babcock, before he was married, he and his friend, I can't think what his first name was, Eddie was his last name, they came over here with that automobile. Well, first, before that, they came over with a bicycle, a tandem.
Oh, yes,
Well, they rode up and down Main Street all evening, carrying various girls here in town before they were married. And that was a great treat for these girls to ride on. One of them was Bess Neal.
This is on the bicycle.
Huh?
On the bicycle.
On the bicycle.
Bicycle go for two.
Yeah. And they had, they traveled all over. They had a trunk-like thing that would fit in between them. And so they traveled a lot on that. You see the ride from here to Medina, it was quite a trip.
Yes, I should say so.
And when that automobile came, this is quite I can remember that so clearly. It was one of those things that they went in from the back.
Oh, yeah.
A door opened and that for the people in the back seat. And Fred came over. He took my father, and I don't think my mother's with us. I know Herb Park was, and myself. And we drove around to see some of their relatives. One of them was the Whitkins over on what you call Whitkin Road. I think they call it Pound Road now. And the other one was Gates family out near the Warren Corners. And on the way over, then we went right on straight to what they call Thompson's Corners and then into Mendon.
Oh, yes.
You know where that is?
Yes, I know where that is.
And one of our relatives lived up on that road between Mendon and Honeoye. And on the way over, there were two horses or several horses that gets up in kind of a field here, and saw this automobile coming, and they ran down right through the gate and out in front of us. Well, Fred went on, trying to catch up the horse, and when he got to Thompson Corners, he gave it up and turned to go to Mendon. Those horses ran to Victor, and
All the way to Victor?
all the way to Victor, and they caught them over there anyway, and the Maitlands was a family of horses. They had to go over and get them. Fred had to pay them quite a little, some damages later, which my father handled. And on the way back, they came down past the cheese factory from Whitcomb's, and we came, as I saw the other day when we drove over there, they were bending the road, and there's an orchard in that corner. And as we came up to that corner, a man and woman in a buggy with a horse, and I can see that yet. That horse raised right up like that,
For heaven's sake.
and ran into
Right
the
on the
orchard,
orchard,
and the wheel caught on one of the trees, ducked them out and broke the wheel. And so Fred had to pay for that later, which my father adjusted for him. And that's the second of them. I think the Jobeses had their, maybe before or after, I don't know.
What kind of machine was it? What make, do you remember?
Fred's was called, nothing that we hear
Nothing we have now.
nowadays.
How about the Jobs?
Either, I don't remember either, what the name of theirs was either.
What about the old steamer, mister, that was owned by some man up on West Main
I
Street?
take it all back. I think that came first. Milo Case was over, connected with the salt mills or salt mines, what it is, over Quetzal. And he was some related to Fairchilds. Uncle Milo Case used to come over here with that thing that they had to light it underneath so they get warm.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
It's like one of these old Surreys, I mean, just one seat, you sat right up in front. Frank Barnard had one later, while we were in school, he had one, we steered like this, with a little bit of a, like a buckboard that bounced up and down.
I suppose the road was very good.
Oh, we went to Life, I went to Canandaigua once or twice with it together.
You just mentioned going by the cheese factory. That cheese factory road was named then
Yeah.
for a cheese factory. What kind of cheese did they make?
Well, they made a very delectable and cheese that was sought after, and today. Well, they, out in New York, out there in Grand Rapids, you can get New York cheese. And this cheese was, I don't know, heavens, they used to get a whole cheese because most of them had interest. They were more about a community
I see.
or cheese
You
factory.
mean a family would buy a whole wheel of cheese?
Yeah, they'll take it up and heaven, that's what I can't understand. They would have it there in the house, and they would have it covered over with a cloth, with a white cloth, and then the top of the cheese box. And it'd be there all summer. It'd never spoil.
Well, I know even the river.
Yeah, so did mine. I bought one a number of years ago. On the way back, I bought it over near Batavia. Went by a cheese factory, and I bought one of the little ones. And that one lasted too.
For heaven's sake.
But I used to go to my Uncle Dave Gates, get up in the morning, ride the cheese factory with him. And that's what I don't understand yet, how they'd milk at 6 or 7 o'clock at night and put it in these big cans. And in the summertime, they'd lower this can into a great big water tank.
Cool it.
And the next morning, add it in and carry it down there. I don't know how.
That's
It didn't
remarkable.
spoil.
You recall about the early railroads here in town?
No, I don't. Of course, the Central was built before I was born.
Does the Central go through this?
Called Peanut.
The peanut line?
And my grandfather Barrett gave them the right-of-way. And that's what I've often wondered, what became of that right-of-way?
It was gone.
Who got it? Because the house is built on it now.
You should go look the deed up.
I presume that what happened was that it was, you might say, sold for taxes later
Might have been.
by the
What was your grandfather Barrett's first name?
Stephen.
Stephen Barrett.
The Stephen Barretts and the Amaziah Parks got me down.
You can't find him?
There were so many
Yeah.
in the genealogy. You got Stephen Barrett, S-E-N. I suppose they use that for senior.
Senior.
And then really turn over the page and find another Stephen Barrett Senior.
Yeah, it's just totally confusing. It takes a lot of study. And they
But see, I
came,
remember when the Levi Halley was built, that's what we called it, the Levi Halley, to the Lehigh Valley. And what a time they had building the old trestle. You remember where that was?
Yeah.
Just out of Honeoye Falls, between
Yeah.
there and the junction. And I read every so often some people get caught on the trestle somewhere.
Yeah.
We used to go down and go across that trestle, go down Pickernutting and so forth.
Yeah.
I never got caught out there.
Well, you're lucky.
My husband and I walked across that trestle one night.
Yeah.
Would you like to comment, Mr. Short, on the old bridge? The covered bridge was replaced.
Let me have that a minute with that,
By the
the magnifying glass, because I can't see, and I know very well that there can you see anything that looks like a walk right there that would start? Because right along the edge of this old bridge, down below the track level, was a walk. And most people can run nuts, even my children and sisters. Because my grandmother Park used to come across there. You remember old Grandma Park?
No, I don't.
No, you wouldn't.
I remember your father and mother very well, but,
I don't know how they got to it because it doesn't
Well,
extend
there was
out.
one there somewhere.
It doesn't extend out to the very edge. I don't believe.
And according to Bird Park, that was taken down in 1888.
This
I
kind of bridge.
know darn well it wasn't, because I was only 2 years old.
You remember it.
And I remember going through and across that bridge.
Now this is across the Honeoye Creek, right up the falls there. It's
Just
not
above the
interesting.
falls.
We have a young man in the office the other day who was looking for covered bridges. He should know about this one. Did you meet him?
I met him in Buffalo. This, you could read that as a picture, perhaps.
Well, that's not so far. That's
This is the
just-
New York Central Station.
remember that.
Remember that?
Let me look at it again.
All right.
I think it must see. Cutler and Train, it says on that. Does that check with you anything?
Cutler and...
Yes,
You know Train, that was your grand?
well, my grandfather Train was
Yeah.
in business
With
with Bogart Cutler.
Yeah, well, that's, I know, I would said offhand that that was the Train bean house.
Their bean house burned in 1902.
And,
Was known as the warehouse.
We got beans for...
well, that's other building, I
It
thought
was
that
the
might count.
largest in western New York, and it was a big
And this
factory.
other thing in there doesn't say, but that was Bill Ray's office, where this other sign is over above it there. And this building over in here was the freight house, and the liner trolley came right in behind that. When I was born, Harry Hopkins, yeah, I've got that name on here, you know, was the station agent, and Mrs. Wren was the telegrapher in there. But there's some difference of opinion on a lot of the things that,
Is that station still standing?
did they tear it down? The railroad's no longer there
You say you went to school in Lima.
for 1 year.
This was high school.
Genesee Wesleyan Seminary.
Then where did you go as a young boy up to 8th grade?
Here.
Here in Illinois.
I graduated in 1904 from high school here.
Oh, from high school here, I see. And then you went on to
And I went
Lima
for 1
to-
year. And I went to the University of Chicago in 1905.
Mhm.
Would you like to reminisce a little bit about Mr. Lay and the terms of his unusual will?
Well, I don't know so much about the will. Of course, all I heard, was father. They had quite a bit of trouble at the time about his, as I told you the other night. And I don't know, of course, I didn't pay any attention to it. His instructions were that he was to be wrapped in a blanket. He had a coal business here in town, coal and lumber and produce and so forth, and he left instructions that he was to be rolled in a blanket and put in this one-horse coal wagon that delivered coal and taken up the cemetery and buried above the ground under cement. Well, I understand that they altered that, and Ada, that was his wife, insisted that it should be changed, and they did change it. But he's buried over above ground, if you know that up there. It looks like a round, big log of
For
cement
heaven's sakes.
on a slab. Got around the legal part of. Nowadays, I don't suppose they'd even let that be done.
No, I wouldn't
But
think so.
he's well encased in cement. But he was a peculiar man.
What was his business here?
Coal and lumber, and he must handle some produce, didn't he?
Well, when did he die?
Let's see. Oh, it's too light to look through here. Oh, he probably died, I should say, in the 20s sometime. Can you remember?
No.
But he was peculiar. He did tricks like that. He was always around the station. That's why I wanted that picture of him standing there. But anyway, he knew all the people on when the train came in. Everybody went in and talked to the trainmen and so forth. One time his son Harry was over there with him, barefoot and dressed like a kid. He got on the train and took him to Buffalo, and his mother worried all day, wondered where he was. Finally, Mrs. Green said, "Why?" She said, "I think Mr. Lee took him with her." Took him with her.
Has the information in those little books of yours ever been copied out? Because a lot of that would be valuable to other genealogists. Those dates, the early birth and death records are not very easily available.
Well, they're all the only way you could do it, and I don't think anybody would know or care about most of these people because it's all local.
But almost you have it in their files.
Look at this and see what you'll see what it is.
It's just little mementos, I suppose, that people
All you got
use.
is, this is the dates of the years. And I don't know what year it started. It doesn't tell in here, I don't believe. And it's the first one in here, as thy days, so shall thy strength be. And each one of these, each day I had one or two in here. And just look and see. You see, I don't think it would. The only way you can get what you're looking for is to look, if you want to know what's.
Well, I think that he's got George Cutler and then Scott married 1889, probably around the 30th of January, don't you think?
That would be valuable for genealogists if they have to. Well, who was George Cutler? Was that Mozart's son?
No, I don't think so. There was, I was trying to think. Mozart was, I don't think Mozart was ever married. I'm not sure.
Well, the
His
Kreiger,
home was where the rest home is now. And all I can remember is that for a long time the school teachers, see, most of them were out of town, and they would rent it and live there. But Charlie Cutler, he was never married, but there was a Cutler family, and two girls, and Ole, who was about my age, that was a boy. He was named after grandfather Ole, who lived up beyond the Dan farm, right on that road that goes right straight.
At this point in re-recording the tape of Mr. Shuart, I have turned the tape over so there's a break in the continuity of the thought right here at this point.
Sent through my application, and I went up to Madison Barracks. When I came back, I was on a leave of absence telephone company. And I knew the manager very well there in Rochester. And he says, "You don't want to come back here." And I did. Oh, he said, why don't you, I'll carry on leave of absence and you go look around. So I went out and got transferred to the Illinois Bell Telephone Company, and about a year after, they sold out to the Rochester Corporation. And I was awfully glad I got out then, because I've been with the Bell system.
Bell system, so much more general.
Had 40 years with the Bell system.
Yes. I noticed in this little book that on the 28th of October is the notation, "Stole the Iron Man from Avon,
Yeah.
1891,
Does it say,
second attempt."
does it say E.G. Brooks and Jen Burton married?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
it was their wedding night, October 28th,
Yeah, they were, and
1891.
after the wedding, they all these men piled in and went over to Avon and stole the Iron Man.
Oh, for
But that was the
heaven's
second
sake.
time they think why they were successful was that the people over at Avon, of course, when they didn't think that with this big wedding on over here that they'd come.
You mean that they were continually protecting their Iron Man? on
Oh,
other
they
nights?
used to, yeah. And now, one of those sheets of paper in there,
Oh, yes.
you've seen this. You have to be careful. That isn't the one, though.
That's the Iron Bridge installed
yeah. That one is so
1888.
torn there.
Oops.
I must get that and paste it together.
I would like something more about the bridge on the
All
tape.
right. Oh, these are,
Now that tells where they were located, the men were. Over
Oh.
there to get the Iron Man.
October 28th, 1891.
Yeah,
And it was Lou Nickerson,
Nixon.
B.L. Beach, Harry,
Oh,
Pillsbury.
Now, beside them, does it tell where they
and
were
it
located?
said they were on the
Roof.
roof.
Yeah.
And then Charles Pierce, H. Hawkins, and Fred Bronson were back of the building.
Yeah.
And William
No.
No, and somebody Park,
C.H. Park.
C.H. Park were in front of the building, and Will Gates and Will Desmond were drivers.
Were drivers, yeah.
Very interesting. That's a good account of it.
This is, that's the one. That's the same ones, but that fact that he tells where they were located.
Oh,
and,
yes.
And he tells on there who were deceased. That, of course, they're all deceased now.
Now, has this been over here ever since?
Huh?
Or did it get back to Avon again?
Been there ever since.
Yeah, it's been
This
here
was
ever
the
since.
final attempt.
They made an attempt once, years ago. They got up on the roof of the building.
Uh-huh.
They gave it up.
But it really belongs to Avon.
No, it came from somewhere in Canada originally.
Oh, really?
St. Catherine.
Oh, for
St.
heaven's
Catherine's,
sakes.
that's right.
For heaven's sakes.
Then came to Rochester.
Came to Rochester then. And Allen got it from somewhere in Rochester.
Rochester. Now, Mrs. Kreiger wondered about the railroad, the iron bridge over the railroad, which you say was installed in 1888,
That's what he says. I don't know. I can't.
and the wooden bridge was taken out at that time?
Well, I know, that's why I know that he's wrong, see.
And then
Because
the-
I came across that covered bridge time and time again as a child. My grandmother lived up, instead of coming down around the bridge, and she used to come across. She had a lantern that she'd carry with a little ring on it, walk along like that, and for instance, at Christmas, she'd come wandering over there with this, in a great big basket, and the lantern in one hand, and she'd always come to the back door. We all knew she was coming. We would all wait to see Grandma come. But she used to come across that bridge, and so I know if I was only 2 years old,
You wouldn't have
I wouldn't
remembered
remember that
No.
walk and going through there. I
No.
think it would probably 28 or somewhere in there.
Could the iron bridge
Because I
have been
can
installed?
remember very well when they put the bridge, iron bridge in.
Would the iron, oh, you remember the iron bridge going in too? And then the iron bridge was
But I
taken
can
out.
remember more things from the time I was 5 years old till I went to school than I
Yeah.
can that's happened in the 40 years since.
Well, they say that things that are very important to you, you do remember, so you
Well, I
must
can
have had an
remember my
important
5th
childhood.
birthday,
Mhm.
and they had a party, and we could march around in our, up the hall and in the parlor, in the dining room, and back in the hall around, and we all marched, but one person wouldn't march with us. My grandfather took up the rear with carrying the flag, and I was 91, he died in 92. But the one who wouldn't march with us was Grace Cannell, and she stood in the corner peeking out like that. She wouldn't walk. Now, I asked her the other day, she remembers. Do you suppose I can remember then? She said, but Frank Lapp said, yes, we went to your party when you, because Frank Lapp said, and Grace, you see, is 3 or 4 months younger than I am.
Grace lives in Honeoye Falls.
Uh-huh. That's
Same
interesting.
But the bridge, I'm sorry I can't help you on that, but I'm positive that that date that Herb's got in there is wrong.
What date would you like to make a guess at with it?
Well, let me see. It was in, I know it was in by 1893. And when we used to go skating down there, well, I would say, I guess better 1895 myself, because I think it was in before the, what do you call it, Spanish-American War. I would say it was in before that, but I know it's not 88 because a 2-year-old child
No, you
could
wouldn't
not
have
remember walking across that thing alone.
No, no. No, you wouldn't have been allowed to, I don't believe. Maybe 98.
It might have been 98 now. Somebody in town must have something else.
Do you recall having heard anything about the big fire of 1885?
No, I've heard about it.
Hear
I've
about
heard
it?
all about it, yeah.
This is an interesting picture of the morning of the day after the fire of 1880, Decoration Day, 1885. The village hall.
Well, now
burned,
that's,
and
you see,
all the buildings around.
you can see all the old buildings. You can see the old Wilcox House, and you can see those stores over across on the main street, and you see a corner of the mill in there. Can you see that?
Yes.
And I presume, well, when was there was a church that burned here at one time too. There used to be an
Well,
old
that
Christian
was
church up on
the Christian church stood on Monroe Street, opposite the library, as that burned, about 1888, I think that was.
That's interesting to me. There's a Christian church, right in my block
Mm-hmm. It would be in Grand Rapids.
in Grand Rapids. And the minister is a real Englishman,
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
and he talks quite English. And my grandfather Shuart's family, when they came up here, belonged to a Christian church. And went to this one for a while, from where they came from. And so I don't know what church it went to, but I do know that old Johannes is supposed to have had a Dutch Bible and came from the Netherlands. But both of his wives had English names. And I've often wondered if whether originally when they left the Netherlands, maybe they didn't come back through England, because they didn't arrive here till around, before the Revolutionary War, but we don't know just when.
Were any of them in the, well, yes, you said one was at Concord.
The story is the Shuart people were, what do you call them?
Tories?
Yeah.
Oh, well, then they were the Dutch of the Hudson River, which was very logical, especially if they had any money.
Well, all I know is that somewhere I have seen it, that they had this man, his name was John Shuart, they called him, but and he had quite a number of acres of land, and he had 4 slaves. And that was the first census. It was 1890. Was that the first?
Yes, yes. Well, that's quite a few.
But it didn't tell.
No.
In those days, they didn't tell how many women were there at all, did they? Just the men. And
yeah, the number of slaves they had.
Would you like to comment on the old Masonic Temple, formerly the Wilcox House? These are good pictures. This was taken on 4th of July, 1874. Do you remember anything about it as a local boarding house when many people
well, all I know is
there?
that at the end, long before the temple bought it, and while the Wilcoxes were still alive, there was a family lived there, and that thing shouldn't be on. And he lived up in this hotel long after they closed it. Had an oil stove up there. That's where he kept himself warm.
Can that
You
go
said-
on the tape?
You said Jack Wilcox was the owner of the hotel?
And his brother,
And his brother?
it's too bad I can't remember.
Was that Sylvester? There
No,
was a Sylvester.
that was the one they called Jack.
Oh, Sylvester was Jack.
Yeah.
Would it have been Al Nathan? There was an Al Nathan Wilcox around in these parts.
But anyway, this man
Remember?
was found dead up there, but dead several days.
Oh,
Probably froze to death or something like that. But they found a money belt around him.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
And they had an awful time, Charlie Pierce and the banker here in the bank, getting it apart because it mildewed and stuck together.
Oh,
And amongst
dear.
them was even what they call old shin plaster from the time of the Civil War.
For heaven's
They still
sakes.
had them on there.
Well, that's a very interesting story. I never heard that before, Mr. Short.
You didn't?
No.
I'm sorry I can't think of his name, because he was
Very interesting.
quite a character, this
Mm-hmm.
brother. That was long, I think both Mr. and Mrs. Sylvester were dead by that time, but
Was Sylvester Wilcox a local,
they just
Honeoye
tore down his
Falls?
house this summer.
Uh-huh.
The Wilcox House became later known as the Despard House.
So that's what,
Just torn down.
one point that I think in the local history, or any place, I don't mean necessarily here, but if I moved in there, they'd probably call it the Shuart House now.
Yeah.
It ought to be, if they're worth anything, they ought to be known as I think they should be known as the Wilcox home.
Mm-hmm. Well, usually they put the original owner and then the current owner, so it identifies it for current
Of course,
people.
people around here,
Mhm.
most people wouldn't have known what it meant by Wilcox.
I don't think they know.
Well, now, who was the first Wilcox that came in? Sylvester?
Oh, gosh, you got me there, because I could tell you, because this
We have pictures
this
of that.
book that I've got tells who came in to
Mhm.
the old cemetery over on corner of
Thomas's Corner.
Thompson Corner
Uh-huh.
and settled. And there's lines through there of park, and it makes you sick
Mm-hmm.
to see the line of infant children
Yes.
died.
Yeah.
And they came here, the first, now I heard a little of your mother's talk about they came to search the land out.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's what this says about the parks. They came from Windham, Massachusetts, I think it is, or was it Connecticut? Anyway, originally they were in Connecticut, and they moved up into Massachusetts, and then came over here, 3 or 4 of them, and those who came here first, names were Treat, Wilcox, Barnard, and this man Barnard was one of the Vanderbilt, I think it was, business